Israel could be about to strike Iran within days, with or without the U.S. support. Is this a damaging leak or a more calculated move to put pressure on the nuclear negotiations? Well, we're going to talk about all of that and not only a possible Israeli strike on Iran, but Houthi threats on Haifa, new rocket attacks out of Gaza, and pressure building, not just outside Gaza, but inside it as well, against Hamas and against Israel. What's going to happen? Well, we're going to cover it all on today's condensed version of our 1 hour live that I do every day. If you want to see more of my commentary on these topics, go watch the full version in the description below. But if you don't want to watch me flap my gums for a solid hour, I get it. That's why we make these short versions for people on the go. So please comment and like and subscribe either way. And go to chuckholton.com for more updates because I put a lot of extra content up over there. And you can sign up to support us over there as well. Now, let's start with the headlines. Israel is mulling a strike on Iran. United States intelligence leaks this information. And we don't know exactly who leaked it, but it's a question of whether or not this is a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, did this leak take place because Israel wanted it to happen and therefore put more pressure on Iran to come to the negotiating table because things have not been going great in the nuclear negotiations between Steve Witkoff and the representatives of the Ayatollah Khamenei. As a matter of fact, one of those representatives said yesterday that the nuclear negotiations have been just basically a waste of time and that they don't see any reason to continue and will not be negotiating any further. Now, that is not exactly what the Trump administration is saying, but we're going to have to wait and see. The other side of that could be that the United States found out that Israel was planning to act unilaterally without their help, and they leaked it to try to keep them from doing so. And we don't know exactly which way it goes, if it's a positive thing or a negative thing. But if the United States, number one, it shows the U.S. is spying on our allies, which is normal. All nations spy on each other. But number two, if we're leaking information that could lead to putting IDF forces at risk and thwarting their plans to strike at Iran, that is not a good look for the United States. And it certainly is not the U.S. supporting Israel. Now, I'm kind of the mind that it's the former, that it's actually was leaked on purpose in order to put pressure on the nuclear talks because the United States came out after the leak happened and said that they would support Israel if Israel decides to attack. That's not a good look for the United States either, because if the United States is not willing to attack ourselves, but we're okay if Israel does it, it just looks like we're sending our little brother in to do our dirty work for us because we're too afraid to do so. And the United States certainly has the assets to strike at Iran, and Israel needs those assets if they're going to do a good job at the mission, because Israel by itself cannot destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities. Their stuff is buried too deep underground. Israel doesn't even have airplanes that can carry the massive ordnance penetrator bunker buster bombs that are required to collapse those tunnels. And so they need the United States to bomb Iran with those massive ordnance penetrators if it's going to be effective in setting back Iran's nuclear ambitions. Now, Iran, for its part, has been rattling its saber as well. They've been jamming GPS signals in the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf in order to try to get commercial shipping to go off course and stray into Iranian territorial waters, and where they can pick it up and capture those ships and use them as bargaining chips. I talked about that at length yesterday in our live. You can go back and watch yesterday's live about that. And so these are high stakes games that we're playing here. Now, if Israel uh, feels the need to strike at Iran, what that tells us is that it's likely Israel knows something we don't. Uh, they they have assets undoubtedly deep inside Iranian intel agencies, military, government, everything, and they've got very good intelligence on what Iran's capabilities are. And so, if they think it's time to attack and they can't trust the United States to attack for them, then now, President Trump says he's going to be leading the charge if Iran won't come to the negotiating table and agree to give up their nuclear program. But they've already said that's not going to happen. Iran has already said, we're not going to give up our nuclear program. Point, period, end of story. Not going to happen. So, what's the Trump administration waiting for? It's not encouraging that the Trump administration has been moving assets out of the region that it brought in there a couple of months ago, specifically B-2 bombers that we would need for those bunker busting missions. So that kind of tells me that the United States is very reticent to actually attack Iran, partially because it might close the Straits of Hormuz. And if they close the Strait of Hormuz, then the price of oil will skyrocket, and that will help Russia in its war against Ukraine. So there are a lot of interconnected things, a lot of moving parts here that have to be thought about if the United States or Israel is going to actually attack. Now, Israel is obviously watching Trump's Iran deal talks closely. But the key takeaway from the CNN article that announced this yesterday is that the chance of a strike has gone up significantly on Iran. And so we may see something shake out in the next couple of days. Trump obviously wants a deal, and it says that if he can't get a deal, he'll be leading the pack against Iran. Well, let's see it happen. Put your money where your mouth is, President Trump. Now, there is a ongoing blockade that the Houthis have declared against the airport in Tel Aviv. And it's been surprisingly effective, even though they've not managed to destroy the airport or anything. But they've just scared away a bunch of the international airlines that fly into Tel Aviv. And so Ben Gurion Airport is a little quiet these days because there are only a couple of airlines left that were flying in there. And the Houthis now have said that they're also going to blockade the port of Haifa. Now, that's largely symbolic. They can't blockade the port of Haifa, but they're trying to do the same thing to scare away business for Israel. And to them, that's a win. Even all of the strikes against the Houthis notwithstanding, even though they've lost their airport, they've lost their port facilities on the ocean, but they don't care. They see this as a win for them, and the Houthis are playing it that way. And so is much of the Middle East. So there's something to be said for perception over reality. Now, Ashkelon found itself under rocket attack today from Gaza. So that just shows that even in northern Gaza, where the IDF is in control, there are still hidden rockets in the ground that can be uncovered and fired at a moment's notice. And they are still threatening the citizens of Israel who live around Gaza. And it just shows that the IDF still has a long way to go in actually defeating Hamas. That suspected launch from Gaza was intercepted and nobody was hurt, as most of them are, but that doesn't matter. Hamas is still showing that they have the capability to fight Israel. There have been ongoing battles inside all across the Gaza Strip. The IDF lost one soldier and had another one wounded in a building that collapsed on them that was booby-trapped. So again, this shows that Hamas is militarizing all of the buildings, more or less, inside Gaza. And whenever a building is used for any military purpose, including being booby-trapped, it gets flattened by either the booby traps going off and flattening it, hopefully not with IDF troops inside, or the IDF sees the booby traps and they just bomb the building into dust that's the way they diffuse bombs in Gaza, okay? Now, the EU and the United States are both pressuring Israel to give more aid to Gaza. The Biden administration and the EU leadership are pushing Israel to ramp up humanitarian aid. They have reopened the crossing and they're allowing aid into the Strip. That aid is that was only like 5 trucks the first day and 100 trucks the second day. But again, this is in response to pressure from the outside. Israel is not inclined to send aid in there because Hamas still has aid that it could pass out to its people, but Hamas is intentionally starving its people in order to use that as a weapon. They're weaponizing hunger against Israel, and it's working. The UN, the head chief of aid deliveries, went on BBC yesterday and made a remarkable claim, an absolutely ridiculous claim. It was so ridiculous, I have to show it to you. Listen to this.
Now, that's a drop in the ocean. And let's be clear, those 5 trucks are just sat on the other side of the border right now. They've not reached the communities they need to reach. And, let me describe what is on those trucks. This is baby food, baby nutrition. There are 14,000 babies that will die in the next 48 hours unless we can reach them. This is not food that Hamas are going to steal. No, we run the risk of looting.
So he's saying 14,000 children are going to die in the next 48 hours if they don't get aid into the Strip. He says also they have thousands of trucks lined up outside the Gaza Strip waiting to go in, and that's a lie. They don't have thousands of trucks out there. There's hundreds, I'm sure, but not thousands. And it's crazy. Like 14,000 children are going to die in the next 48 hours. How did he come up with that? Well, as it turns out, he is just exaggerating very badly from a study that came out that was just released. It says that over the next year, about 14,000 children in Gaza are going to be at risk of malnutrition, not starvation, which is a different thing, but malnutrition. So not in the next 48 hours, in the next 12 months, there will be 14,000 children potentially that will be suffering from malnutrition if they don't allow any more aid into the Strip. That actually bolsters Israel's position and not the UN's. So the UN had to come out and walk back those statements by its leader there on the BBC because, look, people are going hungry in Gaza. That is all the fault of Hamas. Hamas still has food they could give out, but they won't. There are lots of indications that people in Gaza are getting fed up with Hamas because they know it. And so we've seen some of the largest protests against Hamas happening in Han Yunis over the last 2 days, and even more planned. So this means that Israel's strategy is working, putting pressure on Hamas and showing the people that Hamas could feed you, they could help you, but they're not, is turning the people against Hamas. And so the calls from the EU leaders of Spain and the UK and France and all this pressure that they're putting on Israel is actually helping Hamas at this time. And that's something that Bibi Netanyahu has tweeted about, saying this is egregious that these EU leaders would be standing on the side of Hamas in this rather than on the side of Israel is just trying to defend itself. So that is the majority of what's going on there. Now those protests in Gaza are a big deal. And so it's a high stakes moment in Israel. Israel's under intense pressure, but so is Hamas. So the question is, who will break first? And we'll have to wait and see. So that's your 10-minute update. Thank you for watching The Hot Zone. Please make sure you're subscribed to this podcast and also go to chuckholton.com. Toss me a bone over there. $9 a month. You can support our work and we'll put it to good use. So thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.